What is up, fans? Welcome to another edition of the PG Pitt Show brought to you by FanDuel. I'm Stephen Thompson. That's Abby Schnable. We are getting ready for Pitt's spring game, the conclusion of spring practices tomorrow afternoon. We're going to see what we can, I think, loosely call a Heisman Trophy candidate, at least if you believe our FanDuel. Mason Heinschel, way down there on the Heisman Trophy odds list, but he is there at plus 22,500. So if you like value, that's maybe a good play for you if you really believe in Mason Heinschel's Heisman Trophy odds. We're getting ready for some spring football. We're in the midst of wrapping up spring football, but Abby, we're talking basketball today because there's some new faces on campus, some visitors that the Panthers are bringing in via the transfer portal. They're really getting to work building next year's roster right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've been able to confirm three players that are visiting. I know that they at least have one more scheduled on Friday, but I'm not confident on the name right now. But Wright State's Michael Cooper is on the list. He plans to visit this Sunday. You've got Hudson Mays from UC San Diego who visits on next Tuesday, and then Jonathan Powell is on campus today as of Friday, getting a look of the Panthers. And you look at the numbers, people may not be excited about, a guy from Wright State or a guy from UC San Diego or a guy who came off the bench for North Carolina. But like for a Pitt team that's starting from scratch, I kind of like at least two of the three, and I see a place for the third as well of these picks. And it's good to see Pitt hitting it hard, but realistic as well, in the sense of you're probably not going to get like a star, like one of the top guys, not only because they're asking for upwards of $5 million, but also because Pitt just doesn't have the great track record right now. So if you're able to get one of these, high upside guys that have proven that they can compete at least a college level, I think that's a great start.
Yeah. Take me through who you like the most out of this group, first of all. Let's start there. Who's got you really excited of this crop of three guys that are coming to visit Pitt over the coming weeks?
So I'm personally really excited about Michael Cooper from Wright State.
Mhm.
People might be a little shocked that he didn't pick Jonathan Powell off that list, but I mean, I've been a mid-major person to my core for a while. And what I really like about him is I think he's a clean fit. I think he's a very talented point guard, and we know Pitt needs that right now. Yes, Makari Moore, as of Friday, 12:42 p.m., has not entered the portal, so you have him. I don't think he's ready to take a starting role. Michael Cooper started every single game for Wright State, including an NCAA tournament game. He averaged 13.4 points, 2.7 rebounds, 2.2 assists, and he's very low turnover. And that is what Pitt wants. Pitt needs a guy that they know that they can count on to move the ball around and to score when needed. Pitt would. We talked about this last week. Jay Kuntz isn't necessarily looking for a guy to be their leading scorer from the point guard, but he wants a guy who can score. And, he has put up numbers against some good teams, or maybe not good, but like, some power conference teams at least. And I just think this is the exact type of player Pitt should be prioritizing instead of chasing stars, because he can score out on all three levels, move the ball around. And I see this as a guy who can translate well to the power conference level if given that opportunity.
Yeah, capable three-point shooter, I think around 36%, maybe just a hair under, on some decent volume. The thing that really stood out to me was, 2.2 assists, I think doesn't jump off the page, but there is a lot of room for this guy who will be a sophomore next year, he was a freshman last year at Wright State in all Horizon League all freshman team selection, I believe, last season. But his assist rate really took a big jump up when he played against better competition. I believe this is according to Ken Palm, against top 100 competition, his assist rate went up to something like 19.9%. So that tells me that there is not only room to grow, but that when he did play against better competition, he really scaled up his role and started to play some of his better basketball. He scored 17 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds against Cal in their season opener last year. So I'm with you. I really like Michael Cooper as well. But you brought up Jonathan Powell. I think that's another guy who could be a pretty clean fit into what Pitt needs. I don't want to call him a one-trick pony. I don't think that's necessarily true, but he does have one, I think, proven skill at the power conference level. He's been a really capable three-point shooter on high volume. at least for his role, both at West Virginia, which is where he committed out of high school, and then at North Carolina as well. I believe he's a career 36% three-point shooter, but does it on high volume. His minutes took a hit last year at North Carolina, but that's why I look more to his West Virginia days, where he was playing a bunch of minutes for a 19-win team. I believe they went to the NCAA tournament, or maybe they got knocked out because of it. Actually, no, they did not make it to the NCAA tournament. They lost in the first round of the Big 12 tournament, I think, to Colorado, and that's where their season ended. But a bubble team, so a competitive team in a really difficult Big 12, but was a really, I don't want to say elite, but a good, really strong shooter and a really capable shooter. And I think that's mostly what Pitt needs. If he can be an average defender, and if he cannot turn the ball over, which is what he's done for most of his career, I really like the way that Powell could fit into Pitt's lineup next year as well, because they need shooting really badly.
Probably my biggest takeaway from if Pitt were to add him is they're bringing a guy that's experienced and a guy that is not only experienced, but experienced on the power conference level. He's played in the Big 12. He's played in the ACC. He knows what it takes, whether his minutes were, diminished in the ACC or not. He sat on the bench and watched North Carolina have to fight in their games, and he did the scouts against all of the teams. He knows what an what ACC play is like. And I think that's really important when you consider Pitt isn't bringing back any of their contributors for last season. I mean, yes, you can say Makari Moore, but any of their main contributors are not back. And so having a guy like Jonathan Powell who knows what it takes to compete at that level, successfully or not, I think that is huge. I also think he has a fairly high upside if given a little bit more space. We talk about the West Virginia and yes, it was pretty much all about shooting, but you got to think that was 2 seasons ago. How much has he grown, at North Carolina, that he's now able to come and play at Pitt and just have a little bit more freedom? Obviously still going to be a 3-point shooter, but how much has his defense gotten better? How much has his shooting from inside gotten better? And I don't know, I'm just excited about the leadership aspect that he could potentially bring, as well as the experience. And there's so much we don't know about him because of his season at North Carolina, but you have to imagine that's a guy that improved, even if it was just, in the practice gym, because that stuff goes a long way. And so, he reminds me, like, he's fitting almost a Noyes Interstatus role in which, he's going to come in, he's going to shoot, and hopefully he's able to match that defense, and hopefully he's able to, adjust kind of earlier than we saw Noyes.
Yeah, I agree. Like, all of these guys, and we'll get to Hudson Mays in a second, from UC San Diego, but all of these guys are going to be scaling up their roles a little bit. If you come to Pitt, and I guess that depends on who. I mean, shoot, like, they have 11 roster spots to fill, so there are going to be a lot more names kind of coming through the program and being considered for the Panthers, and considering Pitt on the other end of it. But I think especially Cooper and Powell are guys who are going to be asked a lot of. They're going to be they're going to be closer to center police players. I think you could imagine them as starters. I think especially for guys who've only played a combined 3 years of college basketball, like, it's encouraging to see that they've had some success, against power conference competition like that. But tell me more about Hudson Mays, Abby. What do you know about him?
Yeah, so Hudson Mays, when you look at his numbers, they're intriguing. 11.1 points, 5.7 rebounds, 1.7 assists. But I'm not necessarily as hot on him, just because I don't necessarily think he's ready to make that jump to power conference. But that's not necessarily the reason Pitt is looking at him, because the production isn't there right now. So Pitt might be looking at him because they think there's an untapped upside, or they see him as a depth piece, because at this point you need depth pieces too. And I feel like that's probably what they're pitching, because I just cannot imagine him being a starter. And that's not to say I don't think he's good. I mean, he's high energy, he rebounds pretty well, but he's just not proven or consistent offensively. But this is a guy that if you think you can really train up over the summer, early in the beginning of the season, maybe you're able to slide him not into the starting lineup, but slide him in a little bit more so that you have depth and you're not just playing 6 or 7 guys a game. Because I do think he has that potential to, learn quickly and get to there, because you don't put up those kind of numbers this early in your career if you don't have something, but does that something translate to, Pitt basketball and ACC play? So I imagine that this visit with him is more of an evaluation kind of thing, trying to really figure where he could potentially fit, and less of a, we know we could plug him into the rotation right now. But you need those guys. Like when I talked to Kuntz last Friday, he's talked about how they need to recruit starters, but they also need to recruit guys that know that their role is coming off the bench, or know that their role is developmental, getting for a future season. And that's kind of where I see Hudson Mays. And that's not saying maybe we're absolutely surprised and he can jump in and make an immediate impact. Who knows? He could. There's definitely going to be the opportunity there. But right now, I see him more as a bench piece. But you need those just as much as you need starters.
Yeah, I would really like him as a bench piece. I think, high upside defender, athletic guy, can rebound, all that stuff. He's capable of knocking down a three. But I do think it's the lack of 3-point volume. He's a 36%, 35.5% 3-point shooter last year at UC San Diego, just on really, really limited volume. So I think he's a capable free throw shooter, which indicates that I think there is like some upside there. Like he could be a plus shooter, and the mechanics are all right and everything like that. But I do think that is what's going to ultimately hold him back from being like a full-time starter right away. That said, if he's coming off the bench for you, I actually really like it, just because he can be a specialist, defensive rebounding and defending, with his size at 6'5", like definitely seems like a power conference level player. To what extent, I'm not as sure about that. Like you said, we could be really surprised. I like the profile. I think it's a guy that you need on a winning team, just maybe not in a starting role. I'm on board with you in that way.
I agree. And it's interesting that when you really look at the players we have remaining, you've got two guards, 2 forwards, but none of them have the experience, and all of the names that we have heard so far is guard. So I'm intrigued to really see, not only what they do in the portal, continuing, because it's still early. I mean, it's only been open since Tuesday, and yeah, these things work fast, but you have to imagine that they have more visits and more things going underneath that people just don't know about. But then there's also the little wrinkle, and maybe not wrinkle, it could be a really good thing for Pitt in theory, is this 5-year eligibility rule that the NCAA is ruling on that would grant players 5 years period, starting from either your 19th birthday or graduating high school. It's an attempt to, prevent 23-year-old European players coming over and just dominating the freshmen. But it also could mean that Pitt is able to bring back 2 pieces in theory if they are grandfathered in. There's a lot of question marks about the rule, but in theory, Pitt could bring back Barry Dunning and Cam Corhen, and you have to wonder if Pitt is thinking about that while they're doing their visits, not necessarily planning around that since it's not a guarantee, but definitely something that I'd imagine is in the back of their head.
Yeah, definitely. I think with Barry, that is a lot more compelling to me personally, on kind of a basketball level. Like I know Cam really finished the season well. But 90%, not even 90%, maybe closer to 80 or 85% of his career, Cam just really looked like an odd fit, in the Panthers lineup. It does seem like they liked Cam when he played the 4 with a more traditional center, right? The limited minutes that he played with Papa Conte, and it was against mid-major competition for the most part. They were actually pretty good defensively. The numbers at least reflect that. I am not so sure that I really want to sign up for one more year of Cam Corhen, and that is, I appreciate everything that he did at the end of last year. But Barry Dunning, though, is someone that, like, because of his 3-point shooting, his defensive ability, his ability to rebound, especially offensive rebound, that's one I think I could get excited about him coming back. Corhen, I think you'd obviously take him. Like you have to fill 11 roster spots somehow, but seems a little bit less compelling to me than the possibility of one more year with Barry. What say you?
I absolutely agree. And if Cam does come back, he needs to be playing the 4. They need to get a true center. I think he handled the role for as well as he could this year, especially down the stretch. He was playing really well on the injury, playing 40 minutes a game and all that. But I think he does better in that 4 spot. But I also don't necessarily know if Pitt needs another 4 guy. If you bring back Barry, yes, Barry can do the 3 or the 4. But depending on how many guards they get out of the portal, that changes where they would play him. And Chase Foster, one of the incoming freshmen, is a traditional 4. So do you want to bring in a guy like Cam Corhen who just doesn't have a lot of minutes at that position for Pitt, which could in turn, you have to imagine that you're starting him because of just his track record. And does that take up space that you're willing to take up? But I absolutely agree. I'd love to see Barry Dunning back. I think they were already exploring a potential waiver that he had in this rule, as long as they're grandfathered in, would take that away and you don't have to necessarily fight for that waiver as much. And I just think from a leadership standpoint as well, having a guy like Barry, who we saw fight through the tough times and the times that he was pretty good, would be huge for this team, because as of now, the guys that they're looking at are fairly young and you need a lot of maturity to win. And I think Barry Dunning would be a good piece to that, but they're not planning around that because they can't. So it'll be interesting to see how the portal goes the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'd say Barry, and you can tell me if this is not a succinct way to put it, but I think Barry addresses a need for them. I'm not sure if Cam does, outside of, kind of giving you some leadership and filling a roster spot. Yeah,
absolutely agree.
Yep. That's what we've got for this video, but make sure you're keeping tuned to PG Pitt on YouTube, like the video and subscribe. We'll have more for you from the spring game tomorrow afternoon. Abby will be keeping us posted on all she's hearing about some basketball official visitors, the transfer portal, how the Panthers plan to fill out the 2026-27 roster. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you follow all the written work at post-gazette.com as well, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.